you. And so make sure your voices are heard, and make sure that everybody in the room is held accountable, that we're doing all we possibly can. Mercy said we met at the White House. Part of our job is to tell the people we love, you got to do more, and you got to reorient spending, and you got to take spending away from the priorities of the last 4 years and move them to the priorities that help children and help people. When I read $2.5 billion to redo the Federal Reserve, which shouldn't even exist, imagine if we had those resources in this room and all of you wonderful people had that to save the lives of children and to put people in jail, right? So I believe that the people in the Trump administration want to do that too, so we're going to work together on that. Finally, as far as action is concerned and victories are concerned, small victories but important victories, Rosie came to CPAC and talked about the blank piece of paper, remember? Yelled up the blank piece of white paper, and we call it a clean slate. You called it a what?
Well, the blank page means how a victim can rewrite the stories.
Right.
And that's the most important thing for a victim.
So her whole point was, you know, a rebirth, a fresh start. And Frank Russo, who's already been up here and does great work with the center, and the rest of our partners, and many of you in this room, in 5 states, we were able to pass this really important legislation where the victim of trafficking can start over. All of the crimes that they were forced into committing, they get to put that in the past. And really for all of us, we can't be haunted by the demons of the past. We have to look at the future. And so let's be future-oriented today. Let's think about what we're going to get done tomorrow. If you have a criticism for anything we're doing, we need to hear it. If you have a suggestion for how we improve, we need to hear it. And we just really honor all of you. And part of honoring all of you is also honoring our Creator. And we want to start today off in a prayer. So that's on me, right, sweetheart? Okay. I got to figure out how to do that by holding coffee. So I'm going to get rid of coffee. Amen. Dear Lord, be with all the wonderful people who are here today. I believe that we are humble and want to do your will, but oftentimes it's confusing to know exactly what that means and where that will guide us. Let us understand that every single second, every single minute of our life needs to be dedicated towards your purpose. And we need to start to realize, especially as some of us are combing white hair, that there's only so much time we have to make that difference. And it's our children who we pass on all these wonderful lessons, all of your truth. Let us honor this important mission by making sure as many kids as possible are saved from the evils of our time, and that the people in this room, in a spirit of community, will do all it takes to get the job done. And we pray in your Son's name. Amen.
Rosie.
What are you, on Twitter?
No. Dear defenders of justice and dignity, as we conclude this summit, I will invite each of us to go deeper, not just in action, but in intention. Let us take a moment to purify our motivations. This fight against human trafficking is not about titles or applause. It is about rescuing lives, restoring hope, and walking humble with purpose. We must not act to be seen, but to serve. Not to build our name, but to dismantle the system that profit from human pain. While traffickers are highly organized, we must be more than organized. We must be pure in heart and united in mission. I love that when they visit Mexico, the first thing they did was to go to the shelters, to go to Chalco with all these girls that are vulnerable. This is not for ambition, but for conviction. This is where our true power lies. Let us remember, justice is not a career, it's a calling. And in that calling, there is no space for pride and only humility, no room for rivalry, but unity. We have to be all more united than the crime. Today, I am encouraged to share that this movement is gaining momentum, not just in word, but in law. the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victim Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act, HR 1144, introduced by Congressman Chris Smith, has just passed the Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously. Yes, that's a big thing. And is expected to reach the House floor soon. This bill will strengthen protection for victims and equip nations to fight organized crime with renewed force. As we return to our courts, cities, and our communities, let us not just carry connections, let's carry conviction. Let us not just be professional, let's be lovers of justice, builders of hope, and healers of brokenness. Together, we are not just reacting to evil, we are advancing good. We are building a world where every child of God, every children will be safe, every survivor will be seen, and justice is not just an idea, but a lived reality. Thank you for walking this path with pure hearts and courageous vision. May justice be our compass, and may heaven strengthen every step of the way. God bless you all.
Wow.
I love you guys. And I love the board of Kaleido. Could you please stand up? Thank you, Sam. Sam is going to be our next president in January. She's now the global USA representative, and she's going to go to the world to speak against this evil. And Season, you are like an angel. You are really such a pure heart person, and we love you all. Thank you. Carola, I don't know if she arrived, but I know that she was having problems to arrive. God bless you all, and especially my handsome husband, that he's the hero of all. I love you, Alex.
All right, so Rosie got us started, but I also want you to recognize, if you please could, the people that do a lot of hard work behind the scenes.
Thank you.
Roger and Elise, will you stand up? Elise is one of our new board members. Kimberly and Terry, will you stand up? Kimberly, stand up. Nancy, stand up. Nancy. Oh, come on, keep standing up. Give them a round of applause and thank them for what they do. And Frank, let's get started.
And please, a big applause to Karen White. I don't know if she's here. Karen White, thank you for everything you have done for us. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you all again for joining us, for getting to hear from our leaders at CPAC. We're very excited. We have a slight change in agenda, and it's in the best way possible. Secretary Kristi Noem is going to be joining us here in just a minute. In the meantime, I wanted to run through our successes. You heard it from Mercy, but what we expect from our Center for Combating Human Trafficking. As they so kindly mentioned, I'm Frank Russo. I'm the director of CPAC Center for Combating Human Trafficking, and my job is to make sure that we have an impact across the globe. First, our team has worked, as Mercy mentioned, in over 10 states this year to pass legislation that significantly changes the course of victims and survivors of these horrific crimes. What does that mean? What does it mean that we support victims and survivors? As you'll hear from one of my good friends earlier or later today, the survivors who come out of these horrific crimes have at minimum 3 to 5 felonies, at maximum over 10. How are they supposed to get back to life? Meanwhile, we know that traffickers, unfortunately, in the last 4 years, were not being prosecuted. Victims were paying the price of their traffickers' crimes. And our goal at CPAC is to bring an end to that practice. So how do we do that? I'd love to tell you that it's simple. It's not. We have to go in every single state. And I see partners from across not only the United States, but the globe here, who have worked with us to reframe how we do policy around survivors and how we treat them. That also means we need to prosecute the traffickers. So who are you going to hear from today? You're going to hear from Secretary Kristi Noem, who has done the incredible job of solving one major problem. She has closed our southern border. You're also going to hear from Attorney General Bondi. General Bondi Dag Blanche, Associate Attorney General Woodward have made their top priority not just to find these traffickers. Finding them is only half the battle, but to prosecute them. And you're going to hear today about how they've prosecuted just in the past week and brought charges against individuals who brought children to illegal farms in California to grow marijuana. That ends with this administration. And then the other thing you're going to learn, and this is coming from CPAC, by the way, that there is bipartisan work being done in this space. So you'll hear from Congressman Chris Smith and Senator Marsha Blackburn about their joint efforts with senators like Kristen Gillibrand of New York and like our partners on the House Judiciary Committee, including Congresswoman Lucy McBath, to focus on ending human trafficking. That means bills like the Trafficking Survivor Relief Act, you'll hear about later today. Bills like the international reauthorization of the trafficking grant programs that you'll hear later today. So our focus is not on partisanship, it's on solutions. And even though this is an international problem, we can provide an American solution. So it's our goal to work with each of you. If you take one thing away today, it's that we need your help. We've heard all the time about think tanks or conglomerates or all of these thought centers. That's not who we are. We're an action group. CPAC takes action. And we need your help, whether you're in the United States or elsewhere, to make that possible. If you're in this room, you're in this room because we invited you and we wanted you to be a part of that action. So please, take the time to get to know our staff who are on the wall here that Matt and Mercy mentioned. Take time to get to know all of our speakers as best you can and get excited to learn from the best in the field and the leaders in the field in combating human trafficking. I'll be back in one moment to introduce Secretary Noem. Thank you all so much.
Do I just grab this? I don't. Okay, well, we're starting off with a bang because we're really honored to have with us today our great Secretary of Homeland Security, who was a wonderful member of Congress from South Dakota and a wonderful governor from South Dakota. And, you know, I guess we're not supposed to have favorite cabinet secretaries, but I have to say I'm incredibly impressed with the fact that I think she has the toughest job in government. And she is just, I think, pitch perfect in making sure that she's all around this country, comforting people who have been through these terrible disasters, making sure that we're being tough and everything in regards to the border, and just being a great ambassador for our values and for the Trump administration and for the president. She's always been a favorite of CPAC, and it's our great honor to have Secretary Kristi Noem with us here today. Come on out, Madam Secretary.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for getting up and coming and being a part of this and being a part of the team. It means the world to me. I think most of you know who I am, but first of all, I want to thank Matt and Mercedes for inviting me to be here to speak with all of you a little bit this morning. I just want you to know that my heart is to share a little bit of our thoughts and work that we've done over human trafficking and what Homeland Security is responsible for. But then also, if we get time, I know this is going to surprise everybody here, but if you have a couple questions for me, I will certainly take those, because I always think that's a little bit more engaging for all of you. There may be times where you see us doing something in the federal government or making decisions and you're wondering, why on earth are they doing that, or why is she saying that? And if I ever get the chance to ask her a question, I want to ask her this. So I'll do that at the end here, if you guys are more than willing to do that. Well, you know my name is Kristi Noem. I've had the privilege of serving as President Donald Trump's Homeland Security Secretary. People often ask me how I ended up with that position. President Trump had called me and asked me if I was interested in being a part of his cabinet after he won the election, and he said, I know people have mentioned you maybe for Interior or Ag, but Kristi, what would you like to do if you were given the opportunity to be a part of the team? And I said, sir, I would like to be considered to be the Homeland Security Secretary. And he said, why would you want to do that? And I said, sir, because it's your number one priority. It's your number one priority. We have to secure the border. We have to deport these illegal criminal aliens that are in our country. It's going to be a big job, and it's going to take months and months and months. And frankly, sir, I think you need someone who's tough enough to actually do it. I think you also need to have someone that is able to communicate with the American people why we're doing what we're doing and why it's important to the families that live here. And I said, and I'm a wife and a mom and a grandma. And I think it's extremely helpful to have that perspective out talking to the American people with a heart for families and talking about the impact on families who've been impacted by this invasion that we've seen, but also by the crimes that we've seen perpetuated against the American people. And he was absolutely wonderful and blessed me with the opportunity to serve in this position. And it has been probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my lifetime. If you know anything about me, I'm a farmer and a rancher. Ended up taking over our businesses when my dad was passed away in an accident at the age of 49. I ended up quitting college and taking them over, getting hit by the death tax. That's what got me into politics, was because it made me angry that we almost lost our family business because of tax policy. I served in Congress, and while I was in Congress, worked on human trafficking. Also then decided to run for governor of our state because governors are CEOs. Governors make decisions every day, and I wanted to live a life of significance, do something that mattered, and make decisions that were better for my people. Since then, now President Trump has asked me to be a member of his cabinet, and I am extremely passionate about the fact that every single day when we get up, we need to do something that matters. We need to be engaged in things that change people's lives and give them the opportunities that we had growing up. I can't imagine what it would be like for my kids or for my grandkids if we didn't fight for the America that we had the privilege to live in when we were growing up. Now, Homeland Security is an interesting agency. It's got 23 different departments underneath it. So it has Customs and Border Protection, it has ICE, HSI, it has CISA, which is our cybersecurity agency of the nation. It is securing and helping small and medium businesses and also protecting critical infrastructure like our electrical grid from cyber attacks and those who would wish to harm us. We also have Secret Service. Under Homeland Security, we have FEMA, which is not only responsible for disasters, but it also is responsible for the continuation of government. If the worst of the worst thing happened to our country, FEMA is the agency that would step up and help us run the continuation of government. We also have many other agencies, I&A intelligence agencies. I tell people as I go through the list, we are blessed to have the Coast Guard under the Department of Homeland Security as well. But I tell people what happens in the jurisdiction of Homeland Security is that anybody who lives in this country or comes into this country or leaves this country, we have jurisdiction over. Any product or good that is in this country, leaves this country or comes into this country, we have jurisdiction over. And anything that is on the internet that is sold, communicated, or transpires over the internet, we have jurisdiction over. Our mission is to secure the homeland and to do it with integrity and honesty in a way that is responsible to the American people. So it is a big job, but it's one that we take very seriously, and we're very grateful that President Trump is in the White House and that he takes it seriously. Because as you can tell, the last president didn't. Now, when I was served in Congress here, I was extremely passionate about human trafficking. I was a young mom at the time. Often when I would come here every week, I had all my kids with me and they traveled back and forth. And I was aware of what was going on in the country and across the world and the evil, and involved with my church and the work that we were doing against trafficking and sex trafficking. But I ended up sponsoring some legislation that ended up being signed into law that dealt with human trafficking, allowing us to go after websites that would knowingly perpetuate sex trafficking and human trafficking, especially in regards to children. That bill was a bipartisan bill, and it took a lot of work at the time, working with members across the aisle, but I was very thankful to see it signed into law, because previously, websites that facilitated the trafficking of human beings did not face any penalties or liabilities for having that platform and allowing that kind of action to transpire on their websites. And nobody could go after them or stop them from what they were doing by setting up a forum to where that slavery could be sold. Unfortunately, today, even years later, and we look at the history of the United States, we have more slavery going on in the world than we ever have before. So while we continue to do good work and pass bills, and I'm grateful for the work of our congressmen and senators who still bring legislation, we have a lot more work to do, and we'll continue to do that. When I was elected governor of South Dakota in 2018, I immediately put into my budget someone specifically that would be located within our Attorney General's office that would focus right on human trafficking, and that's all they would do every day, was to go after human traffickers that would be impacting our people in South Dakota, but across the country. In our state of South Dakota, we have 9 Native American tribes, and many of them dealt with a lot of trafficking of children, of women. Missing, murdered, and indigenous women were huge issues for us and for our people, and having someone who facilitated the work and the enforcement and the consequences and penalties for those who would be involved in that trade was incredibly important to me. We also passed a bill when I was governor to define what human trafficking was. Many times we were losing our court cases because it wasn't clearly defined in statute. So we did that. We defined what human trafficking was so that we would start winning these court cases against these perpetuators of violence. And then we also put in more resources for minors who would have been dragged into the industry, minors and individuals that, because of no family, no support at home, maybe drug addiction, bad influences, ended up with criminal records. We allowed them to be expunged and to be clean if they came out of that situation, and we also allowed them more resources for hospital care, medical care, and for mental health care. So, we bring all of that experience then, and I end up in this role at Homeland Security, and we have the responsibility for training the vast majority of the federal law enforcement officers in the country. We do that, and they go out to different agencies across the country. Many of our state and local law enforcement officers get trained under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security as well. And we have several agencies that have become specifically skilled and trained to fight human trafficking. And in fact, I've met with so many different groups that work in the space that you are and that you're passionate about and your advocacy matters for, that talk to me about what our HSI officers do every day. And maybe some of you are familiar with them, but our Homeland Security investigators are an agency that is a partnership with ICE that do the investigative work and specifically are the best in the world at going after traffickers. They go after them every day, and it doesn't matter what organization that I talk to, they say your HSI guys and gals are the best. They always are able to track down those who are trafficking individuals, find the ringleaders, and be able to rip that evil off by its head. And they are an incredibly powerful asset to have. And so I'm so thankful I get the chance to lead individuals like that and agents who get up every day to help save our children and to save women and men from the kind of slavery that we've seen. But let's face it, for many years at the southern border, because it was open, we saw trafficking like we'd never seen it before. The invasion that came over the border perpetuated the Biden administration literally losing 300,000 children. These are children that they brought in over the border. In fact, many times Border Patrol agents would tell you they would see the same child cross with different groups of people in one day. Or in 1 week, they would see the same child be 3 or 4 times crossing the border with a different group of people. They were literally using these children to facilitate their invasion into our country, because then they would immediately be granted asylum and released into our country. The Biden administration quit doing DNA testing of anyone who came into our country to make sure they were a part of our family, their families. And so that was one of the things that we immediately reinstated under the Trump administration, that if a child comes to the border with a group of individuals, we are DNA testing them to ensure that they actually belong together, that they are family members when they claim that. When we're out doing enforcement operations as well, going after criminals on our streets that are murderers, rapists, traffickers, when we find children with them, we're immediately DNA testing them to see if they should be in that situation or with those individuals. We have been able to relocate and to find over 10,000 children already so far. 10,000 children. But we've got a long ways to go, and that's why your help matters, and that's why what you do every day is so important to our department and the work that we do. I know a lot of you, and most of you are extremely familiar with the Sound of Freedom movie that is horrific, absolutely horrific, but extremely powerful and changes people forever. I think everybody who's seen it, it's changed their lives. But I don't know if you know that that whole movie started with an HSI agent who did his work, found 2 children, and then started to go after the ring and found this international web of evil that uncovered that entire trafficking organization there. And that started with one agent that was under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security. That's the kind of work that we do every single day that I'm just so proud of. I just spent this last weekend in Nashville and spent an afternoon with some of those investigators, hearing about their work and seeing what tools they need to go after these criminals and make sure that we're able to bring these children back into safety and these women back into safety as soon as possible. Now, because of President Trump's policies, we've been able to see a secure border. We've been able to see the flow of migrants and criminals and people in this country slow down. To the last 2 months, the amount of people that have entered this country has been 0, which has never happened before in the history of this country. I've gone to 10 different countries and visited with their presidents in Central America, in Latin America, and visited with them and talked to them about the fact that when they have their citizens that are coming to our country, that they should turn them around themselves before they get to America. I have negotiated security agreements with them to share information on criminals and their backgrounds so that when they know who in their country perpetuated trafficking, that they flag them for us so we can find them if they happen to now be here, and we can bring them and force them into consequences and return them back to their home countries. These countries, because of those conversations, have worked and signed biometric data sharing agreements with us, security agreements. They're even telling us that they are now, because of President Trump's strong leadership, they have set up housing programs for their citizens to come back home. If they need a loan to get a house when they come back, they will help them if they're people that aren't dangerous. They will help give their children scholarships. They'll give them food aid for a period of time, train them for a job. And we believe, after visiting in those 10 different countries with the leaders, that we have over 1.5 million people that have already gone home on their own and self-deported just because they recognize they shouldn't have been in the United States illegally. And if they want to come back someday, they need to do it the right way. And they needed to do it, come back on their own. So now, one of the things that President Trump's bill just passed, the big, beautiful bill that he talks about quite often, that is quite powerful, did have some policy changes in it. Obviously, it had a lot more resources for our border, for the border wall construction, but also enforcement with more ICE agents, more Border Patrol agents, more investigators will also be hired. There also will be the ability to return people back to their countries and dollars with that. But it also had some policy changes in it that I want you to know. It's going to make it absolutely mandatory, with the language that was included in the bill, to conduct criminal background checks on sponsors that would be with unaccompanied minors. We have, because of our work, arrested over 400 sponsors that were sponsors of children brought into this country that the Biden administration was paying to take care of and to traffic our children. We have stopped that, and we're so thankful that we now have language that makes it absolutely mandatory to run a criminal background check on someone before they can become a sponsor in our programs. We are tasked to be the chair of the Forced Labor Enforcement Task Force here for the federal government as well. And so we have individuals within Homeland Security that work every day on forced labor. And I know you all have heard the story of the California marijuana grow facility and what was unfolding there at that facility. That is happening in other places around this country that we will continue to bust up those operations. Do the investigative work necessary to make sure when we go in, we're able to bring those who perpetuated that type of violence and slavery, bring them to justice, and incarcerate them and keep them in prison so they don't have the opportunity to be released and released over and over again like the Biden administration did. But also at that one facility, we found 14 children that were unaccompanied minors that were there. And we've often, I think 10 of them were under the age of 12 years old. And they were working alongside these individuals. And we had individuals that were working at this facility that were here illegally, but also were known child traffickers. And what was so shocking to me was to watch the fact that when these officers went in there to rescue these children and to bring them out of slavery, and we're still doing the work to find out if they were in sexual slavery or if it was forced labor slavery only, but we'll do our due diligence on that. But what shocks me is that we had individuals that when our officers went in to save these children and to get these criminals out of this business, that rioters attacked them and threw rocks at them and tried to kill them. And that even with them was a sitting congressman that was in that group of rioters attacking our law enforcement officers, who actually took one of the business cards from one of our agents when he was talking to them and then held it up for the TV cameras to tell everybody who he was and how he should be attacked and be brought to justice for what he was doing there by doing his work there that day. Doxed him and exposed him and his family to threats from these folks that are trying to stop the enforcement efforts that our ICE and HSI officers are doing. This is the battle that we're up against. And one of the things I want to ask you before I close is to ask you to be vocal. I'm not asking you to do anything other than to tell why you're involved in this organization, why you are showing up for meetings, why you are advocating, and to be willing to speak out. I've found so often that these individuals that are out there protesting our law enforcement officers and attacking our law enforcement officers are loud, and that many times communities get intimidated and don't want to say anything or don't want to support them. But we should be doing the exact opposite. We should use every opportunity that we have to stand for the rule of law. I tell people all the time, if you don't like the law, go to Congress and change it. My job is to uphold the law. And we have a president, finally, that doesn't pick and choose which laws to enforce and which ones not to enforce. It's the law is the law, and if you break the law, you will pay the consequences of it. And I think it is so incredibly refreshing to have a president like that. President Abraham Lincoln once said that slavery is founded on the selfishness of man's nature. Opposition to it is his love of justice. And that's what I hope you're all embracing today, is a love of justice, and that we live in a country that is still an example to the world. There is no place better to raise a family, to have an opportunity to own your own business, to live a successful life filled with joy and hope than in the United States of America. I hope you recognize that because you woke up here this morning, you're more blessed than 99% of the people in the world just because you woke up in the United States of America. And that is something we are incredibly grateful for. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for your support of going after those who perpetuate human slavery, trafficking, sexual slavery, and forced labor. It is an incredibly pervasive and evil network of individuals that is larger than I could have ever imagined. But I would tell you that if it wasn't for our individuals like you that have a heart for keeping it on the forefront of the conversation and helping us break the back of this evil, we would not have a country left. We would not have families left, and our children wouldn't have the chance to grow up and to be all that God envisioned and created them to be. So thank you for that. And I will open it up to any questions that any of you may have real quick. I know I went a little long, but if we have time for a couple, I'll sure take them. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your steadfast leadership and for standing firm with the greatest president. As someone who's lived through exploitation and now advocating for others, I want to know what does leading with compassion look like when it comes to survivors?
What does it do for what? I'm sorry, something.
What does leading with compassion look like when it comes to survivors?
Well, number one, with survivors, you need to spend time with them. You need to spend time with them. I think we live in a world right now where everybody thinks they have all the answers. And everybody thinks that they know the right thing to do and is so quick to speak. And one of the first things I feel like I constantly have to remind people is to listen, is to sit and listen. And especially when it comes to survivors, there's so much that we can learn. Years and years ago, when I spent some time with some dear friends of mine who are survivors of sexual exploitation, and sharing their stories, they taught me so much about the difference in healing that is necessary when you've been exploited through sexual trafficking, prostitution, whatever it was. They said, you know, and a victim of violence that may have undergone a rape or a one-time incident on the street has a horrific thing that they have to try to heal and get over. But imagine being raped 50 times a day, over and over and over again. Someone who's been trafficked like that on a consistent basis needs a different, completely set and way to heal and a response and people around them to help them recover from that. And they can be healed through God's grace. But we need to make sure that we don't always have all the answers, that spending time with people, listening to them, and using that in their care and healing afterwards is incredibly important. The one thing I'm a firm believer in is that God created us to serve people. We are happier when we are fulfilling our purpose. So most of the time when I find somebody who's miserable, I'm trying to remind them to go do something for somebody else. We will be happier physically, mentally, and spiritually if we are serving other people, because that's why we were created. Yes, sir. Way in the back. We'll do a couple more, then I'll get you guys back on time.
I'm an international political analyst, and I study a lot about the New York City.
Yes.
And I was neutral until the election this year. Then I find second day, 25th of June, detail and the pattern of Zoran Mandamani. So who is violating the law here? And I filed the complaint to the Justice Department. The multiple law he violated, federal law, 18 title, and human rights, attacking to the religion, and law enforcement. And not only that, the community. So he violating the law. What we can do for such people? This not tolerate in our society.
Are you talking about people in New York City that have to live under the legal?
Yeah, in the New York City about the Zoran, the guy who won the election.
Right.
I filed the case against him to the Justice Department. I have a copy here.
Yes.
If you need copy, I can give you.
Yeah, you can give it to one of my staffers that's back there right beside you. That'd be fantastic. I'd like to look at it. Listen, what we do when we run into sanctuary cities where the local law enforcement aren't able to help us because of mayors or city councils and people that won't have their backs and be there and help us with operations, as we double down. We put twice as many agents there. We go in there and use more individuals and more backup and still run operations because the people who live in those neighborhoods, I've been there on operations many times with our agents, and people that walk by us on the streets on their way to work or taking their kids to school say, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for helping us even when our mayor or our city councils or our governors won't. So what we do in those situations is we send more law enforcement to make sure that we're taking care of the people that we're responsible for. Yes, ma'am. This will probably be the last one. Yeah, you two, both of you both can ask your question. That'll be fine.
I never imagined that this morning I would actually get to talk to you about this problem. And I am particular with an organization, and we are trying to reduce sex trafficking from foster children. And currently, foster children are the #1 sex trafficking source of domestic sex trafficking in America. There has been 2 recent reports, one from the OIG, where they found in 2 years there were 75,000 missing episodes of foster children. And it is the federal and state law to report foster children, but almost 70% of the episodes were never reported. And there's no prosecution for that, is what we found out. When the state actors fail to report missing children, they continue to get the Title IV stream, okay? If they report the children, their funding stream goes away. And so there's no accountability. There's never been one state actor or foster parent ever held accountable about not reporting a foster child. And in the Connecticut audit, it did a study of 6 children who were not reported missing and were foster children and ended up in sex trafficking. So
Yeah, thank you for being passionate about foster children. I grew up in a family that fostered a young man, came into our family when he was 12 years old. I was younger than that, but changed our lives forever. He had lived in a horrific situation through a lot of abuse, and our family learned a lot through that. So ever since then, I've been passionate about the foster care system, and when I was governor, it was one of my main priorities. In fact, I made a pledge when I first became governor, I would not give a speech without mentioning foster care. And the fact that we needed more foster parents, and the fact that many a times those who are fostering may be family members that are not the best situation for individuals to be in, because that's where the abuse continues to be perpetuated at times, or some of the trafficking that happens to foster children occurs. So thank you so much for being involved in that. I will read that OIG report, and we'll focus on that as well. One of the statistics that you all should know that I find that breaks my heart every day is that if we had every church in this country take in one foster child and adopt them, we wouldn't have any foster children. Every one of them would have a home and a family. So many times it is just people looking at themselves. And I have a sister who took in a 15-year-old foster boy and then adopted him, another brother who's adopted 3 children. We need to give these children families, and they need to be families that are safe. Last question.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Gina, and I'm from New Jersey, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence and different forms of child abuse that led to be abducted into sex trafficking. I am filled with gratitude to be here today and to be amongst so many passionate, committed people that are trying to do something to protect our children and provide safety. I am filled with gratitude for your courage to be here and for all that you're doing. And not for what's working, but for what's working. Because for a lifetime, I was the victim, but I was also considered the criminal that followed me with convictions after convictions in different states that I did not choose, that was forced upon me. It was not a life that I wanted. It was not a life that I dreamed of. And it was only until several months ago that all my convictions were finally vacated. But so I served a lifetime. We end up with the life sentence. But I was either able to continue to be the victim and feel sorry for myself, or take advantage of the resources that so many of you, individuals and organizations, provide for survivors. And so I am filled with gratitude, and this is why I chose. If what happened to me can make a difference in one person's lives, then it was worth it. This was not my calling, but I am serving now. I'm from New Jersey. I'm a national speaker. I'm an advocate. And as you said earlier, which really resonates with my heart, it's like we are the people. If we want change, let's not hurt each other. Hurt people shouldn't hurt people. Let's do something about it. Let's come to Washington. Let's be the voices. And so I see you and I hear you and I thank you so, so much, and I thank you and all the administration.
Well,
and
thank
God
you.
bless you and protect you.
Thank you for telling your story. And I think that's a good reminder to all of us, is that people can stand up and talk about statistics all day long, but people will remember a story, a testimony. Your testimony, when you tell it, will change people's hearts forever and get more of them engaged in helping. I just want to thank Matt and Mercedes for inviting me to be with you this morning. Also Frank for his leadership in bringing all of us together. Absolutely fantastic, the work that they're doing, and I believe God's hand is upon it. So thank you for everything. You have a blessed day. Enjoy.
Okay. How great was that to hear from our Homeland Security Secretary? She's great. They tell me there's something called a gender gap, and I'm beginning to realize that might be the Democrats' problem with men and not the Republican problem with women. We have amazing women who are taking the lead, not only on this issue, but on all kinds of critical issues. And the great thing about Republican women is they don't lead as women. They just lead as human beings with a purpose, which is the best part of it. And I get the great pleasure of introducing one of my favorite public servants who was a House member and a wonderful conservative House member and then went over to the Senate. And she's tough. She stands up for our principles. She gets basically a perfect record with her CPAC scoring. She's a real testament to the grit and the real impressive growth that's going on in the state of Tennessee. I mean, it's decided to say that low taxes and common sense regulation make people happy. And so she's a great testament to that. So please give a warm welcome to Senator Marsha Blackburn.
Good morning and welcome to DC. Do I have any Tennesseans in this group? All right. I love it. And I want to say a thank you, a heartfelt thank you to you all for focusing on this issue of human trafficking. You know, this is indeed modern day slavery. And there are steps that can be taken. And it is now a $270 billion a year global business. Think about that. $270 billion a year on trafficking people. And it is primarily women and children. And the estimate is that in the U.S., there are 1 million individuals that are victims of human trafficking in our country. It is in every state. It is in every town. It is in every single community. And I appreciate what Secretary Noem was saying about foster care, because we know many times when you're looking at the virtual space, it is foster children who are the most vulnerable, and they're meeting these traffickers and these pedophiles in the virtual space. So I thank you for the work that you are doing to raise awareness. And I want to ask you all to join us in legislation that we are pushing forward that will help make a difference in this and to end this. And that should be our goal, is to end human trafficking, not only in the U.S., but on the face of the earth. That should be our goal. Now, I want to run through a few of these bills so that you have them. You can be on social media about them. You can talk about them. Now, the Report Act, pardon me, the Report Act, we got signed into law last year. This is legislation that I had. It was completely bipartisan, and it requires social media to report to NCMEC when there is child sexual abuse material, when there is trafficking, when there are these bad actors on their website. They have to report it to NCMEC. This is not a may, it is a shall, which is a mandate. So we were pleased to get that signed into law last year. We also have the End Child Trafficking Now Act and the Prince Act. Both of these have been included in the big, beautiful bill, funding for these. And what the End Child Trafficking Now Act will do is require DNA testing at our ports of entry when a child presents and they are not with a relative. Now, this previously was done at our ports of entry, and the Biden administration, in their push to bring more illegal immigrants into the country, they ended it. I said, why did you end DNA testing? And they said, it took too much time. I said, how much time did it take? 45 minutes. 45 minutes to save the life of a child. And we knew that over a third of the children that were presenting with adults they were not related to were being trafficked. So we were able to fund that, to restart that. Also, there is a practice of child recycling that is used by some of the cartels who have gotten into the human trafficking business. And this Prince Act will allow fingerprints. So not only will we have the DNA testing, we will have the fingerprints of these children, so that if they've come through once and they come back again, then we can validate for sure that that is a practice that is happening, and that that child is being abused, and that child is being used in that trafficking. We also have the Gracie Act that we are doing. One of the things is I have worked on this issue of caring for children and making certain that children are not trafficked and are going to be protected. We found out that when Child Protective Services does interviews, they do not always record those interviews. So many times a child is going to be interviewed several times by different agencies over and over, and this causes those children to relive that nightmare. So this will mandate that they record these interviews of the children and adults, and then that child is not having to relive the horrors of what they have physically felt and been the abuse that they have lived through. So the Gracie Act, we're looking to move forward through Judiciary Committee. And, you know, one of the things is that as we record these interviews and that as law enforcement has access to this, sometimes they find out there are other children that are involved, that are being abused. And they have the ability to more quickly identify these perpetrators and get them locked up and get them prosecuted. And that is what we all want to see, to get them out of our communities. One thing that Senator Klobuchar and I realized as we were working on some of our legislation is that the Department of Justice and the U.S. government has never established a national human trafficking database. You have data that is kept locally, you have data that is kept in states, but there is no national repository or place that we keep this information so we can follow these patterns and do analysis and then find children that may be in some states. So we have legislation that would require the establishment of a national human trafficking database. So and we know that having that information is going to be vitally important. And let me give you an example of where we think this could be helpful. We found out in the Biden administration over 2 years ago that there were 77,000 children that they could not find. And then it became 150,000 children. And then we found out the number was 300,000 children. And then we found out it is even north of that. So having a national database, as our wonderful Homeland Security Secretary was just talking about, they're conducting rescues as they are picking up these criminal illegal aliens to get them out of the country. And being able to know where these children are, they have apprehended and saved over 10,000 of these children. They have been rescued. So putting this into a database would give us a repository that we could work from. Now, we've also got the Combating Trafficking in Transportation Act. This is working its way through the House and then should be ready to go to the President's desk very soon. And this will give states flexibility so that they can put signage in their welcome centers and their rest stops saying, if you need help, here is a number to call. If you are being trafficked, you can walk to this officer. You can get help. And we know from what we've seen with putting signs in public areas, this helps people who are in distress to know where to go for help. And the Save Girls Act is legislation that we have that puts grants to local law enforcement. I'm sure many of you have worked with your local law enforcement and have said, look, we want to work with you to raise awareness, to educate people, and to help with rescues. And not all communities have agencies or coalitions that work on this. In the Nashville area, there is the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, and they work with law enforcement on conducting these rescues and saving women and children that are being trafficked. So this is grants directly to local law enforcement to help them as they work to save these children. And of course, we're continuing our work with the Kids Online Safety Act. And I know many of you, thank you. Many of you have supported this legislation. Senator Blumenthal and I got it out of the Senate last year on a 92-3 vote. We were really thrilled with that vote. And we are working, it's reintroduced this year. We are looking forward to having the House move forward with it. But it is imperative that we put the burden on social media platforms, which is where most children meet a drug dealer, meet a pedophile, end up finding somebody that traffics them. And it is imperative that we put the responsibility on social media and make certain that there is a toolbox for parents and kids to detach from these algorithms, and that there is going to be a mechanism for parents and kids to report these bad actors. So we are grateful to you all for your activism. We're grateful that you are here in DC. We're grateful for your support, and let's end the practice of human trafficking. Thank you all so much.
Well, we have had an exciting morning, and I think my wife, if she's watching, will be happy to know I'm getting my steps in, trying to get all of our speakers to you. So thank you for your patience as we get going, and we're really excited to continue with an incredible guest list. It's my honor to introduce our next speaker, the Honorable Congressman Chris Smith. Chris Smith, if you know him, Congressman Smith, as you should know him, is an internationally recognized pioneer in anti-human trafficking. He was the chief author of the landmark Trafficking and Violence Prevention Act in 2000. He actually, and he'll probably tell you this, so I won't steal your story, Congressman, had to do it over objections from an administration, from people in the field, from law enforcement who didn't know that he was simply trying to give them more resources to bring an end to this horrific crime. He's majored basically, or been a part of every major anti-human trafficking piece of legislation since I got into this town over a decade ago, and really any of you who've worked in this space know that he is the champion on anti-human trafficking, and even though he'll never, and probably be too humble to admit it, has saved thousands, probably tens of thousands of lives across the globe because of the work that he has done. He has the best team in Congress as well. I can't say that enough. And it is my honor to bring before you Congressman Chris Smith, a good friend of CPAC.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for that kind introduction. And above all, for the great work you're doing, the great work that the Schlaps are doing, the great work that people in this audience are doing. So many of you have made all the difference in the world in this fight against modern-day slavery, so thank you for that. The fight, we're engaging it with everything we have, but we still need to make far more progress than we've made so far. We need every single law enforcement person to be situationally aware, and that goes for across the board, our hospitals. And we did a bill years ago when we discovered that the traffickers so often brought in their commodity, the person that they thought they owned, to get medical help, and nobody would ask questions. Nobody would say, what is this? Why do you have these bruises? So that changed with legislation that we got passed as well, so that many of our, particularly the emergency room folks, are situationally aware as to what's going on. And if something doesn't look right, you call law enforcement and have them take care of it, and that will hopefully free that woman or that individual, as well as protect not protect, but lead to a prosecution of the trafficker. You know, in 1995, I've been in Congress since 1981, but in 1995, we began to see, because I did a lot of human rights work in the Soviet Union, the East Bloc countries, China. I chair the China Commission. I have a hearing that I'm doing again today on Taiwan. But we began to see with the breakup of the Soviet Union that the apparatchiks, the KGB types, were all going into organized crime. They were already in it, government-sponsored. Now they were doing it in a more privatized fashion. And not only were they selling drugs and weapons, they were also turning women, especially, into commodities for sale. And I was shocked by it. The rise of the internet provided an additional incentive for people to make those connections. Pornography flourished, and that led to an additional demand that I think is absolutely unconscionable. But it did lead to many, many people getting snared, especially women. I introduced a bill on the issue of child trafficking in the 1990s, mid-1990s. Tried like crazy to get it passed. We got it passed in the House, and the Clinton administration opposed it, and it died in the Senate. I then introduced the Trafficking Victims Protection Act in the late 1990s, and it was deja vu all over again, to quote Yogi Berra, who's from my state. It was like, here they go again, saying, we want to be involved with this, but we don't want you to tell us what to do. So I had all the hearings on it, on our bill. We had Harold Koh, who was the Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Labor, and Human Rights. A guy that was genuinely had real credentials in the human rights community, who testified against 80% of the bill. He said, we don't need a tip office. We don't need sanctions, because Madeleine Albright doesn't want any sanctions whatsoever on the international side. They like the Interagency Coordinating Committee, and they also like the T-visa, and they like up to life imprisonment for those who commit these heinous crimes, particularly life if the child happens to be 14 or less, and up to 20 years for others. They like that. Everything else, no way. They didn't even want reporting, and I don't know if you've seen the TIP report. It's very, very voluminous, very data-driven, and on the three principles: protection, prosecution, and prevention. And there's a narrative for each country of the world to determine whether or not they live up. And if they don't live up to at least these standards that are prescribed in the bill, what happens? They get sanctioned. And we need more sanctioning, frankly. But, over the years, there have been very faithful presidents to adhering to following up on the sanctions and everything else. I'll never forget George W. Bush, to his everlasting credit, put two of our best allies on what we call Tier 3, egregious violators. That would be Israel, and that would be South Korea. Within a year, they passed laws, did a mobilization to get off that, because we were a mirror being held up to them. We said, well, we don't want women being sold into slavery in Tel Aviv or in Seoul, Korea, or anywhere else. And they did the right thing and got off Tier 3 the old-fashioned way. They earned it. And now they are Tier 1 countries because of the good work that they do. But we did have a situation under Obama. I'll never forget it. Because of other issues, President Obama went and falsified the grading of these countries, a lot of countries, 14 in all, and gave them inflated grades so that they would not be held to account, all for political reasons. So I held two hearings on it. The first one was, why did you get it wrong? Reuters, three reporters did a great incisive investigative report and found out that this isn't what the tip office wanted. This isn't what the people who live this every day wanted. It's what the politicos wanted in the White House, so they falsified the record. So I did two hearings on it, and the second one was, next time, get it right. They didn't, but at least we tried. There's always a tug of war within the Department of State. A lot of ambassadors and a lot of people in the state don't want to have that problem when they deal with their country where they're working. Hey, stand with the victim, and stand with the victim exclusively, and everything else changes. So, just for the record, this year is the 25th anniversary of the Trafficking Victim Protection Act. I am the prime author of it. Took 3 years to get passed. It almost didn't get passed. Sam Brownback played a great role over on the Senate side, and Sam's a great guy, and he was the Senate guy and did a wonderful job. But 25 years later, we have well over 2,250 major prosecutions that led to incarcerating these terrible people that traffic. One of them was Jeffrey Epstein. He died, of course, never got justice meted out, but he was being prosecuted pursuant to the provisions of the TVPA. I did 4 other laws since. One of them is called International Megan's Law, and that law took 8 years to get passed. The Obama people were against it, on the record. I couldn't get them to change. He ended up signing it, so go figure. But he kept blocking it in the Senate. 3 times we passed it in the House. Now, what does International Megan's Law do? Megan Kanka, that wonderful young girl and family, 7 years old, brutally murdered by a convicted pedophile, lived across the street. And then the perpetrator of that crime had the audacity to hand out posters, papers saying, "Do you know where Megan is?" I mean, talk about a duplicitous man. Well, he was found out, prosecuted, he's in prison today. It led to Megan's laws throughout the country. Now, I discovered that many of those, once they get out of prison, and we have GAO data to back this up, they get a passport and they travel to hurt and to destroy, really, young children all over the globe, whether it be in Thailand, Mexico, Brazil, name the country. Child sex tourism is very real. So we got this bill finally into law, and what it does, it notices country of destination, but a convicted pedophile is planning on traveling to that country. And if they lie about it, they get up to 10 years in prison. So we're not kidding. We want to stop child sex tourism. And as a way of redundancy and to ensure that we stamp the passports of all of these convicted pedophiles with a message to border security when they are coming into Thailand or whatever, that the bearer is on the sex registry list. And we know that they were being turned away at borders when they show up. The good news is well over 30,000 notices have gone out. It could have been more if we got it passed without the 8-year delay under Obama. But it is making a difference, and hopefully it's have a chilling effect. We also put reciprocity in the bill so we would be told when their child sex exploiters are coming here to exploit our kids. But it is mostly something where these people travel. They go away for 2 weeks, rent a little boy or little girl, and exploit the daylights out of them and destroy their lives. And we want no part of it, and hopefully we could do more. On the issue of one of the things we put into the law, and I won't go much longer, is that we said anybody who has not attained the age of 18, if there's any kind of conveyance of anything of worth, that constitutes child sex trafficking. If there's an element of force, fraud, and coercion after 18, that too. Now, Diddy was up in New York, being prosecuted on a number of things in the prosecuting document. One of them was the TVPA. I am shocked and dismayed that the jurors did not see that this was trafficking. They held him to account on prostitution, and I'm very worried that this could have an impact on other prosecutions, especially when brave women like Gina come forward and speak out and do so passionately, and then there's no conviction, and he gets off scot-free, and some clowns in the media are celebrating that. I was very disappointed in that, but again, there's 2,225 that are in jail today, and that's in prosecutions sometimes of one or many more people, and we need to do much more of that. One of the things we put into our law as well was to get the states to pass model laws that look like ours, and they can make it better, do it, so that we have more weapons out there on the legal side to bring prosecutions against these individuals. Protection, we need more shelters. There's not enough. And on the prevention side, we're doing a lot. A couple of years ago, I did the Frederick Douglass Law, 5 of them totally, but that one was done a few years ago. And that is designed in part to provide situational awareness to all of our kids, elementary, secondary schools, let them know what this looks like, what to look out for, so that they're not ensnared by these traffickers who are very clever and very often can deceive a 12 or 14 or 15-year-old because they know what to do. We saw during COVID, and CPAC and some of the other groups did a great job in exposing this, that the whole grooming issue just took off. And that, so everywhere we look, there's these horrible challenges. Now, yesterday, the Foreign Affairs Committee passed out the reauthorization of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. We call it the Frederick Douglass Act, and that legislation is named after the greatest abolitionist who ever lived. I read his books. We actually worked with his great-great-grandson, Kenneth Morris, and he kept saying, we got to do more in prevention, more in prevention. So we're naming these efforts at educating our kids after Frederick Douglass, as well as the bill itself. It passed out of committee. Now, what is the backstory on that? 2 separate Congresses, the last one and the one before that, we got a comprehensive bill passed with over 400 votes in favor of it for the Frederick Douglass legislation. It died in the Senate both times. Bob Menendez, my senior senator, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, would not allow it to come out. I was shocked, talked to his people, talked to him, could not get it out. He's gone now, so hopefully Chairman Risch will take this bill up. It should be on his desk on the Foreign Affairs side, Foreign Relations side, in very early September, and just do it. Unanimous consent it, get it passed. Trump, to his everlasting credit, has made this issue a very, very high priority. We're all grateful for that. So I'm very hopeful that he'll put some additional pressure on the Senate to get that bill to his desk. It has language in it, and I'll finish on this. I know I got to go. I'll finish on this. That provides HUD grants. Doesn't increase the amount of money that we're using at Housing Urban Development for vouchers, but it says $35 million per year for women, other victims, but they're almost all women that need this, so they have a decent place to be. I've met women, and one of them just last week, a young woman, who got re-trafficked because she had no place to live. So this provides, employment is part of the mix here, and certainly that is as well. So that is a major step forward if we can get this passed. I am working on legislation, I'm getting late, on legislation on forced organ trafficking. 2 months ago, in a vote of 4-6 to 1, my legislation, and I introduced it last time, got it passed then too, died in the Senate. China, under Xi Jinping, they are murdering tens of thousands of young people, average age 28, every single year. Mostly Uyghurs and Falun Gong practitioners, some Christians, and some Tibetan Buddhists, but mostly the first two, Falun Gong and Uyghurs, who are Muslims, to take their organs out. I've had 5 hearings on it. There's no doubt that it's a huge, huge problem. And Xi Jinping and his thugs in the PRC are making billions in this enterprise. Our new legislation says that anyone who's part of that supply chain gets up to 20 years in prison, and we would sanction Chinese officials, and just says enough is enough. This is the Joseph Mengele of trafficking of so-called health. And here's one little perverse fact. In the Middle East, there's a great demand for organs, in part because of Ramadan, when some people fast and they go too far and they cause problems to livers and everything. So there's a heightened demand there. Now, in the Middle East, they want Muslim organs. So what does the Chinese Communist Party do? It says, we have a supply. We're committing genocide already against the Uyghurs. Let's just kill them and take their kids, take their kidneys and everything else. 2 to 6 per, equally divided between male and female. So this would say enough is enough. And it passed here 406 to 1. I mean, what kind of vote is that? Lopsided, shows everybody wants to get this done. Hopefully the Senate will take that up as well. We're working on a hotel bill on situational awareness there and giving preference to those hotels. And there's many of them that are doing a good job there of making their workers situationally aware. Ditto for the airlines where these flight attendants, they see something that doesn't look right. Oh boy, I'm getting the hook. They see something that doesn't look right. Tell the pilot, he tells, when you offload, you separate potential victims from the traffickers and arrest them. And not the people that are trafficked, but the traffickers. So thank you so much. Please talk to the Senate about this bill. It's called the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Protection Act and Reauthorization. And again, I can't thank you enough. I can't thank the Schlaps enough for their leadership on this. It really does make a difference, and God bless you.
Thank you, Congressman Smith. He is truly one of CPAC's champions, one of the champions for victims, survivors, and all of us in this fight. So again, we're incredibly grateful that he was willing to join us today. Now I'm excited to present our first panel. As you can tell from the agendas that have already gone quite haywire, we have a great group of speakers, but it is going to continue to change as Congress's last day before recess. Isn't that nice? I'd like a recess. Gets finished this afternoon. So for the next panel I'm excited to introduce is the state approaches to human trafficking. With us, we have partners of CPAC who have worked alongside our team for the last 2.5 years to not just pass legislation here in Congress, but get things done at the state level. And first, I'm really excited to introduce Bill Wolf, our moderator. Bill has been a longtime partner of CPAC. He has worked both at the Department of Justice during prior Trump administration, but also now behind the scenes and in front of cameras, whether he likes it or not, to help us achieve legislative victories across the country. Bill, thank you for being here. Next we have, You're going to catch a law enforcement theme today because we cannot accomplish our goals without them. And that's why I'm honored to introduce Karen White of the Attorney General's Alliance. Karen has been a new partner at CPAC, and we're excited to have her here. Speaking of law enforcement, I see my good friend Sean Reyes hiding back there, the former Attorney General of Utah, who's done a great job leading in this work. And last but certainly not least is somebody that's very important to our CPAC team. She was willing to bring Mercy and I out to meet with the survivors that she serves every day. Liz Amelling of Letitia's House is one of the leaders in this fight to not only say that she supports victims, but do it on a daily basis. Liz, I think they're excited to hear from you. All right, Bill, make sure that microphone works. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Frank, and thank you to CPAC and all of you for being here today. This is an incredibly important conversation. We're really blessed in this country to have a president who cares about this issue. As Frank mentioned, I was honored to serve in the White House under his first administration, working on the National Action Plan to combat human trafficking. And now we're so thankful to have him back in office, where he is reprioritizing this issue that so many challenges and just so many victims fell off the radar during the last administration. And I'm really honored to be here with three incredible advocates and fighters in the war to end human trafficking here in this country. We have a very interesting system here in the United States. We have the federal government, which is all in on trying to combat human trafficking. We have some great federal representatives. You heard from Senator Blackburn, Congressman Smith, who are just doing incredible things in pushing legislation forward. Secretary Noem is just amazing, isn't she? The work that they're doing over at DHS is just absolutely incredible. But here in the United States, we also have the states that need to be responding at the same time. States that need to be enacting laws, that need to be fighting for the victims, quite honestly, and making sure that those policies match what we're seeing at the federal level. Last week, we had the opportunity to join several state legislators at ALEC and talk about this very issue around model policies for human trafficking. And so we're joined by three incredible fighters today. Karen, I want to start with you. You've done a lot of work over the years, working with states' attorneys generals, really talking about training and getting them up to speed. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you've done and why it's so critical that our state elected officials are knowledgeable on this issue?
Okay. Thank you. My name is Karen White. I'm the Executive Director of the Attorney General Alliance. We have trained 96,000 prosecutors, investigators, judges, and other law enforcement officials across the world. We've been working in Mexico since 2006, where we were introduced to the horrors of transnational criminal organizations and what they do to real human beings. And I think as all of us get introduced to this, we try to find the thing that we can do to make the difference. And the thing that we could make a difference in is taking a look at legislation so that we could get statutes in the US and other countries that allow us to prosecute the elements that make up this crime. We found over our last 18 years of working with states to update legislation, working with other countries to develop legislation that led to criminal codes and led to the ability to prosecute people, that money laundering is the key to this crime and to most illicit crimes. So there are people with wonderful stories here about their niche. What I want you to walk away from us is, on a bipartisan basis, your state top law enforcement legal officials are working to change laws in their states and working to train prosecutors in other countries so that we can have a maximum effect and get the maximum penalties so we can eradicate this crime.
Thank you, Karen. And General, I want to move to you. You know, back in the day when you were in office, if we at the federal level or anywhere said, what state is doing it right? We looked at Utah, and that was because of your leadership there, the work that you were doing on human trafficking. Truly impressive for your commitment to that issue. But some people may not fully understand what it means to be the chief law enforcement officer of a state. Could you kind of break that down for us and explain what your role as Attorney General for the state of Utah was in combating human trafficking?
Sure, Bill. Before I answer that, first of all, what an incredible energy here in the room. It's amazing to be here. I have to offer some thanks also to some very important people. First and foremost to God, because it's His light that guides us in this very dark space. Thank you. But also Matt and Mercy and the CPAC board for prioritizing this, Frank Russo and his whole team, the organizers of this event, Rossi and all of the, and Kaleido and everyone else. It's so critically important that we continue to put this first and foremost in people's minds. Thanks to the Trump administration and your service there. I said back in the 2020 RNC that President Trump was the ultimate warrior fighting human trafficking, and he'd done more in his administration than all other administrations combined in history. And that was just the first administration, and now we see again with Kristi coming, Secretary Noem, we'll have Attorney General Bondi, who was one of our colleagues. Guys like Chris Smith, he's been doing it for 30 years in this fight, and perhaps most significantly, everyone in the audience who's here, you all are incredibly important to this fight. Your contributions are immeasurable. We get to sit on a lot of stages and talk about this a lot, but you are out in the trenches doing the work day after day, and God bless you. Thank you so much for what you do. Please keep it up and never feel like you're alone. In terms of law enforcement, one of the things that we were able to do in Utah, which I think was pivotal, because this is a panel on how states can sort of be a fulcrum, I think, for working together. Traditionally, state law enforcement would be siloed and we would work in our lane. But I think what was great about the opportunity I had was, in order to win in this fight, everyone has to be involved. First of all, because everyone's a potential victim. All of our kids, all of our grandkids, all of our family members. And so you need a structure that is a mile high and as wide as you can possibly get. What do I mean by that? You have to have locals, our city, county officials, state, federal, tribal, global. That all has to be part of the equation. So that's the verticality of it. And then when you look broadly, you have to have every single sector, public and private. No one government agency is sufficient on its own to do this alone. The government itself is not. They need the NGOs, who also need the private sector, who have funds. You know, government was not architected to be very responsive and reactive and nimble. That's why we need the private sector to lean in, and we undervalue the contributions of the private sector. But you need all of those. You need law enforcement from the investigative side, the prosecutorial side. You need rehabilitation, recovery. And in all of those medical and health and housing and services, you have to, I believe, prioritize victim and survivor-centered, trauma-informed programs and policies over and over and over again, and remind people why we're really in this fight, and it's to highlight resources and support and services for our brothers and sisters who are survivors, who are victims. Bringing that all together in Utah was a pleasure for me, because it didn't matter if it was a county sheriff or if it was the president or a senator. If they called, we were all sharing and we were working together. And the state, I believe, is situated in a really good spot, close enough to localities to understand the needs of their constituents, but also broad enough to work hand in hand with our federal partners, and as Karen highlighted, our international partners. By the way, no one has done more in the world than Karen White and the Attorney General Alliance to train our brothers and sisters around the world in third world conditions and industrialized nations to fight against sex trafficking, labor trafficking, organ harvesting, illegal adoptions. I mean, she did a case that had 27 US states combined to take down a public elected official who was illegally running a black market adoption ring for over a decade, and it was her coordination. So again, so many people to call out, and that dynamic of constant communication, collaboration, coordination, cooperation, I can't stress enough, I believe is the key. So it was great to be the chief law enforcement officer, but we couldn't arrest our way out of anything on our own. We needed all of those resources. It was the NGOs in our state that really put us on the map. And then it was great policy makers and leaders who helped pass much better laws. And then it was our citizens who stood up and said, not on our watch, not in our backyard, we will not let our children be sold. And they called out to the world, and because of that, Utah got a lot of credit, but it was all of those pieces coming together.
First, I appreciate your humility, but it was your leadership, and we're thankful for that. You've really set a model for many other attorneys general across the country. And I really appreciate the comments around collaboration and coordination. You know, oftentimes we do work in silos. Oftentimes, as I'm a former law enforcement officer, I was an investigator for many years, I was not truly effective in my job until I learned how to collaborate and coordinate with our NGO partners. And I'm so thankful that we have one of them with us here today. Liz Emling is the CEO of Free Forever Letitia's House, a dear friend, but also just a hero in this space for the work that she does. I can tell you that at Letitia's House, when no other safe home will take a survivor because of complications, mental health issues, etc., Letitia's House consistently steps up to take the call and takes the hardest of the hard cases. And so eternally thankful to you, Liz, for the work that you and your staff and your team do to support survivors. And we know it's critically part of the approach to eradicating human trafficking. Y'all just heard from Congressman Smith when he first drafted the TVPA, he drafted on the 3P framework, right? Prevention, prosecution, which is what our law enforcement, our prosecutors are focused on, but also protection. Protection of the survivors that have exited exploitation and now deserve access to restorative care services. And that's exactly what Liz and her team do, and they're part of that full continuum, that full approach to eradicating human trafficking. And Liz, you work with local, state, federal. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how the federal government first can support the work that you're doing at the state level.
That's a great question, and it's such an honor to be here, by the way. I'm looking out here and I'm just gobsmacked at these beautiful faces, and I know everybody here cares. But the federal government, I mean, they can set the tone for the states. I mean, I think it comes from the top, and I'm so grateful for President Trump because he's setting the tone, and Chris Smith is amazing. But the federal government, I mean, I'm really hopeful under Trump's administration, funds will be released more easily for NGOs like us. We are a faith-based house. We take survivors who are adults, they're women 18 and above. Our average stay is 2.5 years. We have 2 homes. We get referrals from all over the country. But we have a faith component because we believe that every person is created in the image of God, and we don't look at felonies or your past. We say, what did God create you to be? So when you're at our restorative care home, it's not just a safe place to stay, it's a place to heal and grow. And so in the last administration, we applied for grants and didn't get any because of a caveat in there about gender-affirming care. And the best psychology in the world says you treat the human soul first. And our survivors come, and sexual identity is irrelevant. It's how they feel about themselves. And 2 years later, they've often totally changed how they see themselves and what they want for their lives. So I'm hoping, you know, this is a year of Jubilee, and lots of funds will go to faith places as well. I mean, Mercy said it yesterday, you know, places out west helping survivors off Indian reservations, the Catholic communities that do so much.
Yeah, funding is such a critical component to this, and you know, it goes to that coordination and collaboration. So the federal government allocates roughly $100 million annually to combat human trafficking domestically, but we're going up against a $10 billion industry. So we're only scratching the surface with government funding, and when they put restrictions, clearly that's government overreach. To be able to say to an organization that you have to provide gender-affirming care to get access to funding really is a disservice to the survivors that need those services, that need access to that. And so funding comes both from government sources, but also from the private sector. And it really is an opportunity for us to mobilize our communities in a meaningful way to support the organizations that are doing this work, because I'm sure Liz will tell you, it is not cheap to provide the services for these individuals. And they're exiting exploitation. They lived hell for many, many months and years for some of those survivors. We need to make sure that those services are of the highest quality for them, because they deserve that on their path to restoration.
Oh, I was just going to say, Bill, on that point, one of the reasons I stepped away from public office was because I wanted to be able to influence more. Now I get to advise. I sit on boards. I advise family offices, funds, foundations, and the money there is so much bigger. The reason we have sometimes a scarcity mentality, even amongst NGOs, is because they all seem to be fighting for the crumbs that the federal government or state apportions on the side. Really, if we can harness, and every single person here can be part of that process, which is, again, why I want to emphasize the point you're making, because we all have employers, we all have influence over businesses, over entities in our community. If we can get them to lean in, then government doesn't have to feel like it has to solve every problem. President Reagan used to say, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program, or government solution. But people in government have noble aspirations. They want to help, but they're not, government, again, is not engineered to be the end-all and be-all to solve all these social issues. So we need every person in here who owns a business or who has influence over a business to say, what can we do to contribute? Forget having to go through the government is critically important. I'm not trying to dismiss all of the reasons we need good leadership there, but it's a one-legged stool unless we have the NGOs who are doing the heavy lifting and then the people funding them, and that has to be the private sector. So please go back out to your businesses. If you're a small business owner, don't wait until you're bigger or more successful. Start now. Start your own foundation. Create a mechanism. Give to another vetted foundation. Do whatever that you can do, because without the private sector, government will try to do it on its own, and we will not be successful without your help. And so I think that's such a critical point.
I couldn't agree more. And as somebody that oversaw $6.5 billion worth of federal grant programs, I can tell you the federal government does not do it efficiently at all. The private sector is so much better equipped to be able to handle that. And thinking about funding, Karen, I want to switch back to you for just a second. You do a lot of training. And I think it's important for us to understand there's also a lack of funding and availability of training. Why is it so important? Do prosecutors, do police officers come out of their basic training or law school understanding how to prosecute cases of human trafficking, or is this really a specialized area?
This is more of a specialized area. With all of you being caregivers, naturally in this field, you understand the delicacy of the human condition when people are asked to testify. Prosecutors have to make cases and can make cases without, full victim participation, and often they have to do that because people come out so scared. So I think it's important that just as you treat the person who has been trafficked, that we prepare the prosecutors to be equipped to take care of the human being, then follow the money, and follow those crimes. And state attorneys general are particularly adept at overseeing their legal system. You have to remember, only 4% of crimes are prosecuted federally. So you getting to know your local attorney general, who has a lot of these connections that we're talking about, these public-private partnerships, since this is now an international issue and talked about at the national level. Many attorneys general have taken human trafficking as a project within their office. They have a dedicated person. They hold statewide seminars. And we, as an organization, we pick the best prosecutors from across the state, and we take them, and we do it virtually, we do it in person in other countries, but don't overlook your state officials. And some of you that are up here speaking and talking, have them come to your program, have them come meet some of the victims. Our entire organization got behind this because we went to Mexico and spoke with some women who were kidnapped and raped and then held at gunpoint, pulled money out of their ATM, and then discarded on the side of the road. And our attorneys general were like, this is wrong, this is happening in another country, we're for justice for all people, we're for a community that includes all people. And from that time in 2006, almost every US state has upgraded their human trafficking statutes, and attorneys general are aware and care, and they're the people who can prosecute. So,
Karen, can I say one more thing about the training too, that you've done so well? I want to give credit because you've harnessed, again, private sector companies like Microsoft or Peregrine AI, and they donate their services so that when we go to a third world country, we can start to stand those up. I mean, amazing that they're getting state-of-the-art, cutting-edge equipment, AI, and other tech resources to be able to combat this horrible evil. So again, congratulations to you and AGA.
Yeah, just it's amazing work. And Liz, you work a lot with state prosecutors. You work very closely with the Virginia Attorney General Office. Attorney General Jason Miyares is a huge champion of this issue as well. You work a lot with local prosecutors throughout Virginia and Florida where you serve survivors. Could you talk a little bit why it's so important for advocates like yourself, for service providers, to be involved in that criminal justice process? Why and how you can help inform being trauma-informed and victim-centered?
Trauma-informed is so important because we have survivors that come, and sometimes they say they don't realize they've been trafficked. We had a young lady who was cognitively impaired, and she was arrested with her traffickers who were from Mexico, and that was in Virginia, where she was arrested, and there were 8 felony charges. And she was sent to our house by law enforcement, and she said, I wasn't trafficked, it was my choice. Well, the prosecutor was amazing. It took a year to go to court, and the prosecutor, when she questioned her on the stand, did it so well. This young lady at the end said, she said, did you get to keep the money? She says, oh no. And then she says, well, what would happen if you kept the money? She said, they would have killed me. And then the prosecutor says, are they in the room? Can you point to them? And she did. And we didn't clap because you're not allowed to clap in a courtroom, but we were grinning at her wildly. And then they got 25 years to life, which was brilliant. But anyway.
We can clap here.
Yeah, okay. But what was even more amazing is this was a mom who her mother died when she was 10, and she was snorting cocaine, and she had 3 kids. And when she left, I said, sweetheart, do you realize that's what the definition of trafficking is? It was like a light bulb moment. But it took a year at our house where she was cared for, safe, got tutoring, et cetera, for her to even begin to heal and be able to do that. So when survivors come, most of the time they don't want to testify. But 6 months or a year later, sometimes they have a light bulb moment and they say, hey, I'm ready to do it. But law enforcement is getting much better than it used to be about dealing with survivors, so we're very grateful for that. Because sometimes, you know, our ladies are still scared of cops.
Yeah, and that's thanks in part to what General
Your
Reyes
attorney.
has done,
Yes.
what Karen has done, General Miares in Virginia. So we have some really great leaders in this space right now on that. So we've talked about the 3 Ps, prevention, prosecution, and protection. Over the years, the field has sort of recognized 2 additional Ps. Those are partnership and policy. And General, you talked about partnership. I wonder if you could dive a little bit more into that. You were kind of on the front lines early on in that space. If you could talk a little bit, what are some of the challenges to partnership, and how are you able to overcome those in Utah?
Sure. I think you mentioned some before, just the mentality of being siloed, and this is our turf, our information. Too many people worried about who gets the credit when no one cares about who gets the credit, and everyone's just on the same mission to help protect and to make sure that we restore people's honor and dignity. Then, you know, magic happens. In terms of partnerships, I mentioned it, alluded to it earlier in the NGO space. Too often we're fighting amongst each other. Somebody quipped, you know, the charitable world is the least charitable place sometimes because there's so many sharp elbows, because everybody has, again, sort of this scarcity mentality. If there was an abundance mentality and we all realized, look, there is enough to go around, especially if we increase the pie, and I'm sorry for continuing to go back to this over and over again, but if we expand the pie so that we have a lot of new donors and we have a lot of new people who are energized, who are using their businesses to do in-kind goods. This was something that Heather Fisher did extremely well. I'm just calling her out because you worked with her when she was the czar. John Cotton Richmond, Ambassador Richmond, Heather Fisher, and Ivanka Trump. This was the Trump team that led the partnerships for the whole entire United States. And day one, they said it's a nonpartisan issue. This is not a Democrat issue, it's not a Republican issue, it's a human rights issue, it's a family issue, it's an American issue, it's a global issue. And that welcoming spirit really broke down a lot of barriers and allowed everyone to come together. I learned the most about partnership probably from the first case we did, 2014, State of Utah versus Victor Rax. This guy had been for 15 years trafficking little boys. He had a predilection for little boys, so he was a narco trafficker and sex trafficker. You former law enforcement and your task force, you know how this works. So he raped and abused little boys, sold them, and he had been deported. The feds had popped him 6 times, and he'd come back every single time. And they knew he was there. When we finally got him, we said, hey, will you do us something? Can you imagine if we had a Kristi Noem or a Donald Trump back then? This wouldn't have happened. But the feds agreed. The partnership was, we said, look, please trust us. We're going to prosecute under the U.S. justice system here in the state. And because of that, the victims knew that he wouldn't be coming back this time, that we actually were going to prosecute him and put him away forever in life. He actually hung himself, took his life in the middle of the trial. I was ecstatic because I thought we won't have to deal with some legal loophole where he gets extradition or he escapes the noose. I mean, I'm not ecstatic about anybody losing their life, except this guy, because he had hurt so many young kids. But the victims and survivors were not happy, and I couldn't understand that. I was new, and I said, what's going on? And so they taught me a lot about partnership, and they said, AG, here's the thing. We've suffered so much, we want a chance to tell our story. And so we actually asked the judge to keep the case going. As you can imagine, over the protestations of defense counsel who said, our client's gone, there's no more case. Let's close this. We said no, and the enlightened judge let us for days bring forward survivor after survivor, hardened, tatted up gangbangers who were like 26 years old, but who had been 10 years old when they first started being exploited in their own bedrooms by this monster. And that's really where I started to learn about partnerships. And the key is listening and understanding that you need a victim advocate, to your point, because law enforcement, we re-victimized victims over and over again for so many years. It was, let's have the victim advocate be involved in the case at the very beginning and guide how we investigate and then how we prosecute. If we don't have to put them up, we don't even charge under the human trafficking statute. People are like, well, that's crazy. You spent so many years getting a human trafficking statute passed. Well, if I can get and take down a whole network and charge them on tax evasion or something else and not have to put a victim up on the stand or a survivor and re-traumatize them, then that's what we're going to do. But it was, the partnership was really about sitting down in good faith and trusting others, and then having the courage, I guess, to just say, okay, let's step out there, even though at the time it was very unpopular. A lot of people criticizing us. No one wanted to talk about it. You remember those days, Bill. Taboo. Don't stop talking about it. You're like the fourth horseman of the apocalypse. This is so depressing. Stop it. And today, thank goodness, we've mainstreamed this issue enough. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but those things popped into my mind because of the incredible work that we have from NGOs and victim advocates like Tanya Gold, who's going to speak later, and amazing partners that we're blessed with.
I think the one big takeaway I had from that is using the criminal justice system as part of the healing process as well, right? Giving those victims that voice to be heard is so powerful.
So cathartic for them.
Yeah, yeah. So we have to wrap up. What I want to do is we hit on the 4 Ps. The last is policy. I'm going to ask each of you in 20 seconds or less, if you had a magic wand as we sit here in the halls of Congress today and get them to pass a piece of legislation, a policy, what would it be? Liz, I'm going to start with you.
Oh dear. It's like when you have, can you get your meal last? One piece of legislation? Oh, that's tough. Well, it's going to sound crazy, but I would love to see a federal law that would send traffickers to jail for life. And I would also, I know that sounds for life, but I'd also like to see them have to work while they're incarcerated, and the money goes back to the survivors.
Little different tack. I'm going to take a businessman. I would love to see a federal law that says you lose your license to do business anywhere in the United States if you're at all a part of the supply chain of trafficking, whether it's sex trafficking, labor trafficking, anything. Can you imagine? No matter how big you are, no matter how small you're not doing business in America.
Well, I think I have to. I have to exchange my P words because I know we're asked about policy, but I'd really like to ask you for your prayers. We need a big, mega focus from one of our country's millionaires, billionaires, who takes a look at human trafficking, and we get some sort of big structure and support behind this movement so that we can incorporate all of these Ps. So your prayers for God to place his hand on someone's heart and say, this is what you should be doing.
Amen. Amen.
And prayers for our survivors.
Yeah. I just want to thank all of our panelists. Folks, you now have your charge. You are in Congress. When you leave here today, go knock on a couple of doors before they get on their planes and go home, and let them know these are the policies that we need. Thank you for you three.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
I have the unfortunate role of being the orchestra at the Golden Globes and play off the great speakers that we have. But I also will be on the side cheering and clapping because everything they're saying is not only true, but something we all need to take home with us. We're going to move quickly into our next panel, which I'm excited about. That's actually plays entirely and perfectly off of Karen's comments. Faith has to be a part of this fight in human trafficking. And to that end, I'm excited to introduce our moderator, Leah Stauffer from 500,000 Kids. She is an advocate and a ground game expert when it comes to the issues relating to foster care and how foster care implements and impacts trafficking. So Leah, please come up. I'm also excited to announce Tanya Gould. She's the Director of Anti-Human Trafficking for Attorney General Miyares. Tanya is also a survivor. She's a survivor who took her own story and turned it into action. And now there are really more people than she can count in Virginia who every day benefit from her hard work. Thank you, Tanya. I'm also excited to introduce a new friend of ours, Basil Baz. Basil is unique in that he played a critical role, having been a law enforcement professional, seeing every day the horrors of trafficking, and then translated it, I know you're probably not gonna take all the credit, but it's true, to the show The Blacklist, and helped Hollywood understand some of the horrors that were going on in its own world, and has now taken that fight on the ground level to hold these traffickers accountable and rescue children where they are. Thank you, Basil. And last, again, but certainly not least, we have our new friend Travis Weber. Travis works with the Family Research Council, where they have prioritized faith, not just in this policy area, but in all the work that they do. But importantly, they turn faith into action. Travis, we're excited to hear about the work your organization's doing, you've been doing here in Washington, D.C. Leah, it's all yours.
Hi. Oh, loud. Hi. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Faith and fighting. Thank you, Frank, for giving us such a fabulous topic. Matt and Mercedes, wherever you are, thank you very much for asking me to moderate. Oh, there you are. Thank you for asking me to moderate. And what I'm really so thrilled about this year is the emphasis on the U.S. foster care system, as well as, yes, I heard you earlier, yes, as well as the children, the more than 300,000 children that have come over the border, because we care deeply about those children. But our U.S. foster care children are equally important and deserve a seat at the table. A lot of people don't know this, more than 20,000 foster children go missing a year. So our own children are also being trafficked, as many of us know. But it's important to know there's also things like hidden foster care, where there's another 250,000 children that aren't accounted for. So I'm just thrilled that there's an emphasis on the U.S. foster care system as well as the border. I really appreciate that. But let's get to it, because for such a time as this, when we are rescuing children, and faith is such an important part of this, because we're dealing with demonic evil that is happening to our children. And I am very honored to highlight the work the three of our amazing panelists are doing. And I'm very interested to know, because you're confronting evil. You're coming face to face with evil, and what role faith plays when you're confronting such demonic evilness. I'm actually going to start, even though we're in this order, I'm actually going to start with Baz. I really want to acknowledge you for having the longest running NGO of rescuing children in America. I think that, and his wife Tina. Let's give him a round of applause. So I'm going to start with a question for you, Baz, because if you could share with us. Oh, okay. No, God is back. That was not good. If you could share with us a situation or two that has caused you to use everything within you, every fight and every fiber of your being to rescue children, and how faith has led you through, or how faith has come in when being in such a dark place.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you today. Thank you very much. My name is, she says, Basil Baz. I'm a Citadel graduate, former captain in the United States Marine Corps, CIA Special Operations Ground Branch, and the founder of the Association for the Recovery of Children, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization of former intelligence, military, and law enforcement personnel that are dedicated to the recovery of missing, exploited, and sex-trafficked American children. We got our start in Mogadishu, Somalia. Many of you know that area from an incident we had called Black Hawk Down. I got back to the United States and realized there was something bigger than overthrowing small governments. Jumped ship from the agency in '96 and started the organization. We do this at absolutely no cost to custodial guardians and no paycheck in our pocket. We do it because it's the right thing to do. So far, we're blessed to have a 100% success rate, and at every child we've gone after in 34 years now, we've brought home, and we're grateful for that. But thank you. But there is a heavy spiritual component to all of this. Let me set the platform for you. God doesn't need your belief or your disbelief in order to exist. And for we who are in the trenches, we see that spiritual component. And when people ask me why predators do this to children, it's because it's evil, okay? How do you want to hurt the heart of God? You go after the most innocent and the most precious of his creations. So everything that ARC does was started by God. We were called by God to do that. And I'll give you one little story real quick to show you how God shows up. In every single operation we've run since 1993, at the very end, when we've done everything Tier 1 operators can do, God takes our options away. It's kind of like the Gideon principle. He cuts our forces down. And he does that so he can show up and take the credit for it. So we had a little girl that was abducted from Texas. She was 7 years old. She was going to be sold into prostitution in Mexico. We went down, set up a command center, and I'll do the short version. And we negotiated with the kidnappers. And they hemmed and hawed back and forth. And we almost thought we had lost the setup and everything. And when I had lost all my options, everything I could think of, to meet with them to get the little girl back, God said, I want you to do this thing. And I said, seriously, God? You want me to do this thing? And so I called up the perpetrator, the kidnapper, and I said, you know what? I want you to go out and look outside your window and tell me what you see. And he walks over, and then he runs back and goes, okay, senor, I will meet you. Now, I have no idea what he saw out that window. No idea at all. But within 3 hours, we rescued that little girl and brought her back home. So that's how he shows up, and that is what we lean into every single day.
Thanks, Buzz. And I'm going to stick with you for one moment. I want to ask you a question about what do you think the public needs to know, and what can we do? And what, in your vision, because you've had the longest running, you have so much experience in this space, what would need to happen to live in a world where we no longer need to rescue children? And I know that's very far out, but if we reverse engineer it from your vantage point, and I know you have some specific strategies, what can we do as the public, and what would the world look like where we no longer need to be rescuing children?
So let me, that's a great question, thank you. Let me set everybody's expectations in cement. We are never going to stop child sex trafficking in the world. That's God's job. It has been around a long time. So many people try to get involved in this AO, this area of operation, and they fall miserably on their sword because they're trying to play in a battlefield that's too big for them. So we can take a bite out of it on our watch. And you can say to yourself, what am I accountable for throughout my lifetime here? And you can do something. One man or one woman with courage is a majority. Please don't forget that. So what can we do? We start at the grassroots. It starts in your community. Don't expect the government to do everything for you. It isn't we the government. It's we the people. Okay? This is happening in your community, your backyard, and you know your community better than any federal agency in this country, okay? So get yourself trained up. Understand what the area of operation looks like. Understand what you can do. Understand your citizens' rights. Do you know most of you here in your state have the right to arrest somebody as a citizen if they're committing a crime, if they're raping a child? Know your citizens' arrest laws. Now, a lot of my law enforcement friends don't want to hear that. But guess what? It's we the people still. And you get trained up, and you can do the job. Go to our website, recoveryofchildren.com. We give probably the best training course in America. We can only do it 6 times throughout the year because we're running operations. But get involved with us. Let us teach you how to go downrange and actually do that. The second thing is you can do this. Pass the death penalty for anybody that rapes a child in the United States of America. Third option, every judge that is too lenient on child rapists, get them out of office. And the fourth option, which I was advised this morning by some friends of mine here in Washington that said, you know, I don't know if you ought to bring that up, Boz, because people in Washington won't take you too serious, because you're in the mecca of politics here, Well, you didn't take me too serious 15 years ago when we were talking about passing the death penalty, and DeSantis has it, and other people have it. So it's called the Congressional Accountability Act, and we need sponsors. Now look, I don't have the luxury of being a politician, to live in a world of compromise and corruption and negotiations. I'm just a war fighter and a leader that's been downrange for 33 years rescuing children. Let me make this really clear. This is not a political issue. This is crimes against children in our country, and we have to do something about it. So I want to leave you with something. Just think about this for a moment. If there's a vicious dog outside that door, and I open that door and I let that dog come in and it mauls one of you to death, am I not complicit in that crime? Absolutely. Too long on the Hill, we have had leaders making decisions for American people, and we have suffered the consequences. Like the open border policy, where right now we have illegal aliens raping, trafficking our children in this country. So let me ask you this. Does an American parent have the right, or should have the right, to not only press criminal charges against the perpetrator, but press charges against any member of Congress that voted for that open door policy? I think they do, because it's still we the people. And it's going to take brave people up here, and they said they'll laugh at you, but started at the state level, but realize we have had people making decisions, and they're not held accountable. I can guarantee you most of the people in this room, if you were to make the same decisions with those consequences, you'd be in jail. And yet others that make those decisions for us that are killing our children in this country because they have now become a commodity of something, a $150 billion global commodity. And we have to ask ourselves, why do we let this happen in our country? Why do we let that? So I'm asking you not to let that happen in our country. If you do not, who will? If you do not, who will? And I'll leave you with this. You cannot not know what you heard here today. So if you leave this room today and you don't take action to save our children in America, the future of our country, then shame on you. Shame on you.
Thanks, Baz. Thank you, and thank you for all you're doing. And I have to give a special shout out to Tina, his partner in these efforts, who's right here in the front row. She's doing the amazing work alongside with Baz. We're gonna move on to, thank you. We're gonna move on to Tanya Gold. She's the Director of Anti-Trafficking for the Virginia's Attorney General Office, and brings a really beautiful and powerful perspective to this issue, and I know is driven to tackle the demand side of this. But what I would ask you to share is what in your story, if you're open to sharing your story, got you to a point now where you're so driven to handle the demand side of things.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you've done. I appreciate everything that you did the thing and you said the thing, and thank you. I see you. Thank you. You know, while you were talking, I was thinking about how I felt as a victim at the time I'm being trafficked, where people would see me every day. It was obvious that this is what I was into, but society saw me as hopeless, a deplorable, you know, this is something I want to do. And so for me, I saw myself the way you saw me, you know, and the truth is, you know, dignity is God's idea. But I wasn't treated with that, especially by fellow Christians, right? And I'm going to say the thing because it should be said. And I grew up in a Christian home and community where a ton of abuse happened, and no one did anything. No one stood up. No one said that's not okay or enough is enough, right? And so that was, because that was my environment. That's what I grew up in. Why would anyone come after me? I would have loved to have met you as an 18-year-old young adult, fresh out of high school, trafficked in DC, and watching my trafficker negotiate the sale of me. And that was the realization that here in America, and I say this often, where in school I'm singing the Pledge of Allegiance and I'm singing My Country 'Tis of Thee, I believed in the idea of freedom. Because at the time as a child, I did not experience that. So I figured, when I become an adult, I can now be free. No, I fell into the hands of a trafficker, right? And so here I am in the land of the free, home of the brave, watching like I'm at a market, right? I'm being purchased, bought and sold in America, negotiating the price of my dignity. And I say dignity because dignity is about your own autonomy, your own ideas, your aspirations, and your dreams, and things you want to aspire to. And that was sold for the desire and aspiration of someone else's because they have money. And that is what was sold. And I had to watch and observe that by every type of member of our community. That is why it's your job. It's not my job. This happened to me. It's your job as citizens. Now, I'm doing it now. Why? Because I remember what it felt like to be in that position as an American, period, where no one thought that I could make anything or do anything. And only in America can I be now a director of anti-human trafficking for the Office of the Attorney General, right? And it's, when people say, how do you do it? It's just, I know because, and I'm very thankful, and I've learned love through forgiveness, right? So I'm able to continue to walk with those and remember those and not forget. And because my identity is not in what I'm doing. That's not my, I ran for Virginia House of Delegates, so I get the luxury of being in a political space, but that isn't my identity. It's not where it comes from. I remember when I was like the dirt at the bottom of your shoe, and it had no purpose other than your purpose. Where you walk is where I would go. I was meeting your desires, your demands. That was my job, and my job was to show up well in that space, or I would reap the consequences. So it's through that faith, that all that I've learned, and the healing process that gets me into this place where I can use the platform of my Attorney General to be able, and our governor, our leadership in the Commonwealth of Virginia, to be able to lead with compassion, lead with the spirit of unity and togetherness and forgiveness and collaboration so we can really do something that's more beneficial and long-lasting. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for sharing with us and for now leading the charge and the fight. We're going to bring it home with Faith. Travis Weber with the Family Research Council, and I'm just going to really turn it over to you because I want you to really bring it home for us with faith and how faith, like I said at the top, we're dealing with demonic evil, pure evil being done to our children. And if you could take us home with some conversation about what you do, share what you do, and faith and how faith informs.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure being here with you all and audience today. It strikes me that as we're sitting here, just the heaviness of this, and we're all gathered here with different callings, different things that God has asked us to, brought us to this one discussion around one issue, but there are many different aspects. And as I'm reflecting even on how we think about this as an organization, other issues that we're called to, as a Christian organization, to reflect on the biblical God's view of these matters in public policy, it strikes me that we cannot separate the internal and the external, the heart, the mind, and actions. And even hearing Chris Smith earlier today reflect on the demand component, pornography, and just hearing our panel earlier, it strikes me that we have to remember and keep in view this reality. Cannot separate the internal, the heart, the mind, the actions that stem from, flow from the heart and the mind, because we know this is the righteousness. Righteousness is the word that's animating the call that we're here for. Pursuit of righteousness, pursuit of justice, which comes from God, and He's uncompromising in His view of that, His standard of it. But the reason it is lacking in our world is the world's broken, but that brokenness stems from the heart of men and women. We have to remember this and know that the way these issues have to be thought about deal with a healing of the heart, an addressing of the brokenness of the heart. Ultimately, that is what we are called to be purveyors of in terms of despite our different specific callings, right? But we have to remember the connection between those. Because the despair on the previous panel, the despair and the pain that led to that defendant committing suicide in the cell, and the brokenness and pain that we're discussing and is featured here, ultimately come from the same source. Not an earthly enemy, but a spiritual enemy of humanity, Satan himself and his forces. That truth, that reality, if we don't have that frame of view, we're going to be off base with how we're thinking about what we're facing. And we're going to be flailing at the wind. We're going to be fighting spiritual forces with natural weapons. And it's like shooting a gun into the darkness. We're ultimately not going to hit the target. Now, as I said, I'm going to emphasize this because I'm reflecting broadly, but the callings are all different. And that's necessary. We cannot all be doing the same thing. But for our role and our call is to be a voice for the church in America to the government. And we have to be, at Family Research Council, an effective conduit, an effective place for the force of the Christian faith community in America to express the biblical view to the government. And I was, just reflecting, pleased on the reflection on what are we waiting for? And this is for everyone. What are we waiting for? We're not here in this room to receive something from, this is a significant place we're gathered, but we're not here to receive something from Congress. We're not. Every one of us, God has given the dignity to, the ability to voice out of our own heart for justice and righteousness, His perspective on what He wants to do for everyone suffering under the evil of trafficking. And so the only thing necessary then is for us to reflect on that and say, God, what do you want me to do as I leave this gathering today? But as we're gazing at a lot of darkness in this area. And if we gaze at it too much and too long, what happens? You kind of suffer under it yourself. You kind of lose the ability to bring hope, the necessary hope to others. Hope is an essential component of what is needed. And hope ultimately comes from God Himself and His Holy Spirit. And if we gaze too long at the issues we're facing, those issues will